Good morning, everyone. Happy day to you. Wherever in the country you are, we're going to let some folks join our webinar over here. If my voice sounds a little, I would say, who is this? Well, my name is Sadie Uribe, and I'm the Community Engagement Specialist for Los Angeles Regional SBDC. And I will be joining you today along with Lori. But before we get into the fun with Lori, let me tell you a little bit about us. The SBDC. The SBDC is a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, helping to stimulate economic growth through business advising and development. We offer no-cost services to the local businesses through funding provided by the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA, and from the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, GoBiz. The Los Angeles Regional Small Business Development Center network serves small businesses throughout Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. We offer no-cost business advising, meaning you can meet one-on-one via phone or Zoom to address your specific needs and challenges. And we also offer virtual training, such as this comprehensive workshop to help adapt and grow your business. So on that note, I'm very excited to see Lori. Hello, Lori. How are you?
Doing great, Sadie. Thank you so much for being here. And for those of you who are saying, where's Lauren this morning? Lauren had to take the day off. And those of you who have been frequent flyers, you know whenever Lauren's gone, we have our faithful Sadie that always takes over for us. So Sadie, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for doing the introduction. And welcome everybody to Small Biz Talk. I'm your host, Lori Williams. So let's get started. And with that, Sadie, just like Lauren always does, is going to be putting information in the chat for you to see. And as always, the Q&A, that's where you want to put any questions you have. I do kind of look throughout both, but I keep my eye on the Q&A more than I do the chat, because in the chat it's just going crazy. That's where you guys like to have the party. Sometimes I think I need to be in the chat because that's where the fun is. So anyway, I've got the financial literacy series coming up. The last session is on the 28th, and I'm showing you that the last session here for session 3 is on the 28th. However, Sadie is putting into the chat the schedule for March already. You can mix and match. Session 2 and 3 are sometimes easier to take together, but that doesn't mean you can't start anywhere in the middle of it. So I wanted to at least let you know I've got session 3 coming up. And when you click on the links, you'll see more of a description for each session. But session 1 is kind of more general, what you need to do for accounting, what you need to know for taxation. Session 2 and session 3, I get into managerial accounting, where I talk about what is the minimum amount of information you need to know. And then I delve even deeper into session 3, talking about how to check your profitability and your cost structure, etc. And I will be scheduling another webinar. I just did legal structures and tax advantages. That was a big one as well. There was many people who signed up and was not able to attend. So as soon as I get my new dates on my calendar, I will let you know that as well. Okay, and upcoming, we got next week, Alex Vasquez. He is an advisor at PCC, and he's going to talk to us about marketing and social media to grow sales. I know that's a big topic for everybody, so I really like to bring as many different people as I can on to talk about it from their perspective. Then the following week, we've got David Ronaldo of College Zoom. He is someone that we interviewed really at the beginning of the show, which is over a year. I can't even believe that, but it's over a year ago now. And he's been in business. He'll have to tell me, because I think it's been at least 10 years. I met David when he first started, and he's been at it for some time. And just like with today's talk, I'm trying to bring on people who started out very small and have been at it for a while to kind of walk you through the stages of what they learned and what they now understood. And it's that concept of, you know, that expression, I wish I knew then what I know now. That is my underlining theme that I'm achieving here, is helping you guys, especially those that are starting out, to gain from the wisdom of others who have walked in the pathway. And speaking have others that walked in the pathway. I'm scheduling for the year. And if you, someone in the audience, wants to be a guest on the show, or you know anybody else that you would think would be a great guest, I do focus a lot on people that are entrepreneurs or in business, but also anybody that has an expertise, like a social media expert or somebody that's involved in, certain lending, as I've had different people come in and talk about banking. So it's pretty much open. I always just look at what the audience can benefit from. But go ahead and send an email to Lauren. Sadie is going to put Lauren's email in the chat. Send me an email and let me know if you think somebody or yourself would like to be on the show. So speaking of the show, today we have a very special show. And once again, I've invited someone back that was on very early when the show first began. Holly Eve is the founder, CEO, and creative director of Madam Lemy. Madam Lemy is a natural and sustainable luxury body care brand. She is also a contributing writer for Forbes magazine. Now, when Holly first started her company, she sold her products at the farmer's market. Today, her products are sold online and in retail locations throughout the world. As a new entrepreneur, Holly had to learn everything from product manufacturing, sales strategies, accounting, obtaining financing. I know because I was there with Holly from pretty much almost day one. I watched her evolve through the processes. And now she has several years behind her, and she has just a better understanding of knowing a whole lot of subjects. I felt as though she was an excellent person to bring on the show to talk about this what I know now that I wish I would have known then theme. So with that, Holly, welcome to the show. So good to have you back on.
Thanks for having me back.
Can you believe it's been like a year since I've been doing this show? I think you were one of the first, at least of the first 10, I think, when I just kind of said, hey, Holly, I got this show. We'll see how it goes. And here we are a year. And speaking of here we are, how many years have you been in business now, Holly?
I just celebrated my 5th year in business, and I had the idea for my company May 30th, 2016, and then I launched January 2018.
Wow, you remember those dates. Let's start with first talking to the audience. Tell them about your product, and let's throw the inspiration and what gave you the idea to even consider the company.
I was working as a celebrity and TV makeup artist for a long time, and during that time, one of my friends was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer at the age of 30. And she was the person who really educated me on lifestyle, food, products, and specifically deodorant. She kept encouraging me to switch to natural deodorant. She believed, in her words, that her diagnosis at such a young age had to be contributed to these outside factors of environment, including products. And so I spent years looking for a natural deodorant and never had a thought I'm going to start a business. I just wanted to find a natural deodorant that worked, and either I would get a rash or TMI, I would smell worse with products that I was trying. And because I was in such close proximity to people doing their makeup, I kept going back to conventional antiperspirants and just not feeling very good about it. And then someone had noticed a rash that I had. I told them it was from a natural deodorant, and she asked if I had ever tried lemons. And so I waited for the rash to go away. I was willing to try anything. I started putting just lemons on my armpit, and it worked really well, but it just was not practical to cut up lemons every day. So, and I had a roommate at the time, and I was putting my lemon wedges in a container in the fridge. There was nothing practical or sanitary about that. So I thought there has to be an easier way, and knowing like liquid, it's going to go bad. So I figured out how to turn lemons into powder, my New York City kitchen, not knowing at the time you can just buy lemon peel powder. But I always say I'm really glad that I didn't know that or to look that up, because it really put me through this process of experimenting and trying things. And from that, I learned so many other ingredients could be turned into powder, and powder alone wasn't as effective, but DIY, Pinterest, Google, free resource, I just learned different ingredients. And my neighbor happened to be an Oxford trained chemist, and I asked for his help, and he helped me create all the essential oils because I didn't know how to do that part. And then from working in makeup and being around a lot of celebrities and just wealthy women and seeing what was on their vanity and the products they were using, I merged the idea of high-end, luxury, sustainable packaging with ethically sourced natural ingredients. And at the time, it's evolved since then, but it was really Mother Earth kind of crunchy granola packaging. And now, luckily, there are more brands that are going to that plastic-free luxury approach, which I think sells really well.
Well, I think that's a key point I'd like to make sure we focus on, because I remember from day one, right about the time I came on board, I think you were looking at the packaging. You were adamant that the packaging had to visually look like a luxury brand. You started right away from day one, knowing exactly the price point and the placement for your product. We're going to go in the farmers market area for a minute, but I think it was so important. And I think a aspect for people to understand that in your case, you didn't cut corners on pricing the packaging. You weren't like, here's the product, let me find the cheapest packaging I can do. You were very careful on the design. Do you have a picture? Do you have one of your products right there that you can hold up? I know you do. Guys, I want you to see this. It's beautiful. The packaging, I know it's evolved, but Holly, it was beautiful from day one. You really made it where, it almost reminds me of the Apple computer. Like when you get it, you open it up, it's so beautiful in the packaging. You made sure the packaging really focused. So speak a little bit. How did you have such a strong vision, knowing exactly what you wanted your product to look like on the shelves to attract a specific buyer? I felt like you knew that day one.
A few things we'll show. So this was the original one, the large size. So it comes in this really pretty packaging. And then when you open it, this one's sealed, but there's a fluffy puff. And then I've since launched little minis and they're magnetized and gold stamped. And the idea, part of it came old school. My grandmother's had these really pretty powder boxes. I'm sure many of those products and my mom filled with talc and toxic chemicals, but they left it on their vanity next to their perfume bottles and makeup. And I just had this idea. I want to create something that's not tucked away in a medicine cabinet that could be displayed on the vanity. And when I first launched it, it was just the idea of a deodorant, but I've had a lot of customer feedback that people use it as a body powder, a dry shampoo. And so we started marketing it, just changing what it could be used for, and our sales tripled. And to answer your question about that concept of the packaging, I really had training that I didn't know. I didn't go to school for business or chemistry or package design, but I had this real authentic learning working in makeup counters before I was a freelance makeup artist. And I worked in really slow stores. And if anyone's been in a makeup store, you see women chatting and gossiping and walking around. And so when you walk from counter to counter, you're talking, but you're also trying different products. And I was always looking at the packaging. I was really obsessed with Benefit. They had this 1960s vintage vibe. And I think that must have just been put in my head, this nostalgia. I always say nostalgia never dies. And I didn't want to do the 60s, but I thought the 1920s, it harkens back to this period where things were more simple and elegant. And at SBDC, this was really well-intentioned advice from a few people. When I was working on it, they said, just launch it, you can perfect it later. And something about that, even though they had much more experience than I did, didn't sit right with me, because I had all of these celebrity clients and public figures, that people that I was doing makeup on, and I knew that I had their addresses and I could send them my product. And I didn't want to send a product that worked really well in cheap packaging to say it works really well, I'll send you a better package later. I think you have one chance when you introduce something to someone, and I think that divinity is in the detail. And I also wasn't posting on social media. I told very few people about what I was doing because I didn't want anyone to discourage me or say something negative. And also, it just didn't put a pressure on me to finish anything. So I took 1.5 years, and the actual formula didn't take that long to figure out. I spent, when I speak at USC, Albert always points this out. There are lines on the packaging. I don't know if you can see it from here.
Oh,
but
yep.
It's an Art Deco design, and I worked with the graphic designer, and I think it took about 5 months to get these lines right to line on the packaging. And it's paid off. People buy it, a lot of them.
I know, I see. That's why I wanted you to speak of it, because I wanted the audience to realize. I remember, because I was talking with you about the financials, and I just remember you spending so much detail. And going back to what you said a minute ago, this is a good place to pick up the farmer's market. When you first started selling, you were at the farmer's market, and you mentioned a bit ago learning different things from the customers as them using it as a body power, etc. I also recall talking with you after a certain weekend, and you would come back with all this feedback. So let's talk about starting at the farmer's market, starting small. If you can see in the audience, I'm really expressing how much Holly really started small and had time to learn. So talk a little bit about what that experience did for you in your learning process.
Yeah. So another thing that an advisor said, well-intentioned, at first when I launched this, I wanted to make it just a really accessible price point. And I had talked to a friend who's a celebrity makeup artist, and he'd mentioned, price this higher. I think I was going to price it at $12, which at the time it's still higher than a regular deodorant or most natural deodorants. And then I thought, okay, $35. And somebody at SBDC that I had grown a relationship with, and he could say this to me, and I knew he was joking, but also serious. He said, you're crazy if you think you're going to sell a deodorant for $35. And then started talking to more people, and someone said, well, get customer feedback. And then my thought was, where are the rich ladies at? So
Yeah.
I thought the Malibu farmers market, and I got a booth there. It was like $50 a week. I set up a booth, and the first day that I set up there, I sold them like crazy, and no one questioned the price. And then from that and from the customer feedback, I then launched a website. And it's so funny because during the pandemic, when some of the costs went up, my price, it raised a bit, the cost of goods. And then I thought, I'm gonna bump up the price a little bit, and even more than what the cost of good was. I just thought I'm gonna try to raise it. And so I raised it from 35 to 42, which is interesting because more people would complain on ads about the price. I mean, a lot of people would buy it, but then there were always people who would say this is too high, the price. And since raising it, it's a strange psychological thing that happened. I think when you really position a good product at a luxury price, people just identify it as luxury. I always say it's like a Rolls Royce or a Rolex. People aren't complaining about the price. They just know that this is a quality luxury product. And it's just interesting, the psychology of people. It's very few people complain about the price now.
And it's so true. And what I love about having you on the show talking about this is most of the times when we have people on and the audience gets exposed to this everywhere is people talking about pricing it as low as they can to try to get people to purchase it. And I'm always saying, first of all, you got to price it what your financials say it has to be priced at, number one, but it's not always the case that you always are trying to be the cheapest. And so I love the conversation we're having. And, I have to bring up something, Holly. And this is so funny because you mentioned about the pricing. And so that was about the time that I was introduced to you, like I said, to look at some numbers. And I remember when you said it was 35, and I never said this out loud to you because there was no reason to, but I'll tell you, my thought was, wow, that's high. And then my secondary thought is, but Holly is in the circles that pay for this at this amount, and you're not the client, there's other people. And I was like, so I immediately went, well, that's very high, but that's high according to me. That's not a high in where Holly is positioning this. And then the secondary thought, which brings everything we spoke of full circle that I had, but Holly is taking every step to make sure the product is beautiful and communicates the luxury brand to support the pricing. And of course, I'm happy with anything that has good profit margins, so yeah. So it's so funny because we're talking about this, is I thought the same thing, but then I had to look at all of the aspects of things. And I think that's where you do. And what I love about what you said, and I know this isn't even something you were noting, but I want to bring this to the audience's attention, is when we get advice, it's not always advice we need to follow. On some level, we have to hear it, we have to be open to it, but we have to have confidence in what we know to be true so we don't get steered into a direction that isn't what we know to be true. Can you speak to that for a second, Holly? I wasn't planning on going there, but I know we've had conversations before where you get people who mean good, but they're like, you need to do it this way, but they're not looking at the full picture. How did you know when to follow advice and when to trust your instincts? I think that's a question many entrepreneurs ask themselves.
Well, one of the instances I can remember, well, running out of money, listening.
That'll do it.
Yeah, I had a remote CFO. I think I mentioned this on the last episode, really well-intentioned. And I had a marketing person who still works with me, and the CFO was saying, you need to not spend that much on marketing, you need to grow things organically. And I'm much quicker now to take advice from people who have had and have product-based businesses, because I think not that someone who knows finances wouldn't know how to operate things, but I think when you have a business and you've sold things, you know that there has to be marketing put into that. And so her thought was just grow it organic. And of course you can do that with TikTok and certain things. It's not guaranteed. And then I had my marketing person who has years of experience in marketing, and she just said, we need to just put some money in the marketing, and I know this is going to work. And at the time I had a lot of people. I think that was another mistake too. I didn't think that I knew how to do certain things, and people are telling you, you need XYZ, different people helping with different things. So I had all of these people, not as employees, but as independent contractors, and a lot of them. So I was spending a lot of money on different people, not really with results of growth and revenue. And then it got to a point where I wasn't only going through the money of my company, but my own personal money to keep people. And it was not sustainable. I think I finally realized that. And so I made the hard but best choice to let go of people, including that CFO. And then my marketing person and I put a small amount into the marketing budget, and then incrementally put more and more. And our ROAS, our return on ad spend, depending on the day, was anywhere from 3x to 8x, which was insane. And it grew so much that we almost bankrupted my company, because it was getting close to 6 figures a month selling deodorant. And that was during the pandemic, when the supply chain, there were a lot of issues. So it was hard to get packaging, it was hard to get product back in stock. I learned a lot from that. And now I have very few people that work with me, and most of my effort is with that one person. We do the marketing, and that's really how I've grown my company. And if I would have taken that advice and kept trying to grow organically, we probably wouldn't be sitting here and talking today.
No. In fact, when I do people's financials, as you know from working with me, I always say, well, if we're going to get to this number, we got to increase the overhead expense, because we have to put more marketing in to get to that number. Because I always say, okay, we say we're going to get to this number. How did we get there? What actions do we need to take? And with what you just said, I want everybody in the audience to note, because I know, and you may not have picked this up, Holly, you started at this point, you went up and then felt the little crash and burn with this experience, then went up a little, crash and burn. So it's not this pretty little growth line that people think it is. There were many different steps where you get into growing pain, and you have to decide differently. You know, it's Anthony Robbins said, but that's not who originally said it. But you know, the thought process that got you to where you are today isn't the thought process that's going to get you forward. I don't know, Einstein might have said that originally, but it's so true. So you get to a certain level, and you have to really change your mode of thinking. You could grow it organically to a certain point, like you kind of did with the farmers market, one could say. But then when you go to the next point, you have to think differently. You know, Holly, I think what we should blend into our conversation right now is profit margins. We're really on the tip of talking about that, because I was going to go into overseas production and everything. But one of the things you learned, and I'm going to use a word we talk about a lot, is healthy gross profit. So why don't I just hand it to you and take it away from there? Because I know you have a lot of experience in the good, bad, and ugly on profit margins that you can share with the non-finance thinking audience.
Yeah, I will just say before I go into that, marketing done right. So if you're going to do marketing, make sure you work with someone, because you can spend a lot of money and go through a lot of capital quickly, not doing it right. So if you are
Good
doing
point,
marketing,
because you had that experience. Yeah, do elaborate on that, because you did have that experience too.
I work, yeah, with a company with Amazon. I'm sure a lot of people have businesses. You get tons of emails from people or you meet people and they promise a lot of things. And the marketing person that I have, she's one of the few people that I've worked with where it's just she knows what she's doing. And I pay her for her experience, not her time, because it doesn't take her a long time to set this up. But we look at the analytics. I've also hired other people when she's been too busy in the past to work with me, and I've wasted a lot of money, and no one will ever care about your money as much as you do. So if companies are testing things and it's not working, they don't care. So you have to be really on top of companies, really vet it, talk to other people, get feedback from other companies that have worked with them, start out small. And I have articles that I've written about marketing that could be a whole other conversation. And then to the profit margin that you were talking about, I'm just now learning about that. Really, I'm really knowing about it more. When I started this, I'm a creative person. That's how my mind thinks. If I had a white room with packaging and colors, I would just create things all day. I never really understood or even saw the importance in a profit margin or in a P&L. I don't even think I knew what that was until a couple of years ago. I was trusting a lot of other people, and I have really great advisors and people, an accountant, a CPA, people that I talk to, SBDC, I speak to you. I get a lot of really great advice now, and I'm not an accountant. I don't have that background, but now I know enough to understand. And for a long time, I wasn't understanding this is what your revenue is, this is what your cost of good is, and then this is what your expenses are. And then after that, that's your profit. I didn't understand that concept. And it's so simple. It's the most simple yet complicated part of a business. And
Yeah.
now I'm really in this mindset of how can I get my costs down? And I was never like that before. It was like, I'm going to pay people for this. I need people. I'm not going to survive without it. I need to do a bunch of photo shoots. I need all of these things. And now it's just, I operate from a very lean position, and I've either reduced the hours of people that work with me, or I've cut positions, and a lot of tasks I've just taken over myself. I think when you're starting a business, there's, I don't know why, but just this misconception or ill advice that I think that people give to other business owners, that you need to hire your weaknesses. And I have articles about that, but you need to hire this. And you only need to hire that when you can afford it. And I was hiring all of these positions when I couldn't afford it. And so there are a lot of things that I just, as I mentioned, thought I wasn't capable of doing. Email marketing, for example, like MailChimp, it's so easy to learn. And I thought that that was beyond me, that I couldn't do that. The social media I've taken over, the comments in the ads, somebody said, you're a CEO, you don't need to be answering the comments. And I took that position over, and my sales, I see them growing since I've done that, because I'm engaging with my community. And again, as much as the people that work with me care about me and my company, it's not their company. At the end of the day, it's my company. And so I'm talking to the community. I'm talking to people who purchase my product or might want to purchase my product. I get ideas for other products, really just engaging with comments and people on our ads. And I just think it's really important when you start a business to have an understanding of what your costs are, of not only the product, but what the expenses are, and just see what it is. What are you doing? What are you paying for that's increasing your revenue? And what are you doing that's just superficial, like photo shoots? I was doing a lot of photo shoots, and I have so much content that I put a pause on that. There are just a lot of things that are not necessarily essential for a business.
And you know, Holly, what I see a lot with creative type, and we had Abby on, and she was speaking to this some time ago too, that was an herbalist. They have, people start out in business and they have this concern that they don't want these huge what they call corporate profit margins. They think, I don't want to be like the big bad corporate people and charge all this money. And then I have to explain to people is that that profit margin gets eaten up really quickly, especially if as you grow, your business model changes and you're having to purchase and do production on a larger scale, which means possibly overseas and different shipping and expenses. So I see companies every day go through a lot of what you did, where you started with a healthy profit margin because you set a price point in a position that you wanted to place the product, but you hadn't grown all of that profit margin and used it up with all the overhead expenses and the marketing and all that yet. But when companies grow, then all of a sudden they use up that and they don't have the profit and they don't have the wiggle room to grow, and they start, like you said, hiring. And profit margins are just seen almost like that big bad evil too often with small companies, thinking that that's only for corporations to talk and think about. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you're going to the grocery store and buying a steak or a quart of milk. It's bought on profits, and they have to exist, and you have to focus on. And I appreciate you mentioning that it is revenue minus cost of goods minus expenses. That's gross profit, and your profit margins is what you take home. And too often people don't realize that at all. Let's talk a minute about the Forbes writing, because Sadie put that in the chat, and you became a contributing writer for Forbes. So you mentioned several articles and I write about it. So I want to take a minute just to let the audience know about your articles and where they can access more information as you're speaking about it.
Yeah, I think if you type in Forbes, Holly Eve, my column will come up. I write really digestible, easy to follow content on a lot of topics for startups. I write for Forbes Women, so I cover female entrepreneurs and then business and wellness. And I started doing that. I've been writing with them for a couple of years, over 2.5 years. I wanted to put out the information that I wish that I would have had. Like you said earlier, you look back at what you wish you would have known. So a lot of articles are on marketing, on finance, and just to mention, as you were talking before about the profit, my company, it wasn't until last year, after 5 years, that my company is finally profitable. And it's not because it couldn't have been profitable, it's because I was spending all of that money. So I have articles on, somebody was asking about grants, so I also write about where you can find funding, different grants. And is there anything specific with the articles you wanted me to talk about?
Nope, and Sadie put it in. I wanted, as we talked about articles and I wrote about that, I wanted to take a minute so the audience knew what we were talking about, you writing, so they had access. That's all. And since you had mentioned it a couple times, I wanted to make sure. And Sadie put it in there right as on cue. Thank you for being behind the scenes for us, Sadie. Now, with the cost of changes, let's talk a little bit about your overseas production. And the part that I think would be really beneficial is, as you know, you and I just worked on looking at some up-to-date costs. And with that, Holly, you were sharing with me, I was saying to you, okay, Holly, I really need to know all the costs. I need to know the pennies so I could filter all these in so I could look at what our true profit margin. I was doing the usual Lori, right? Well, once again, I didn't mention this to you, Holly, because I was focused on getting the numbers, but I have to say, and guys, this is so true. So I sit down with Holly and I say, okay, Holly, I need to spend about an hour of your time where you just go through the process with me. I order from here, because I'm not understanding where all these costs came from. And I was needing to make this financial formula. So I sit down on Zoom with Holly, and Holly starts speaking from the top of her mind, things she knows like this. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that is so complicated. And I'll just give a cue, and Holly's going to go there. She's saying things, well, then it ships to there, and then it's a transport, and then there's a tariff here, then there's a tariff over here, and then I hire this company to do this. I was so overwhelmed by the end, and every one of these added a few more pennies. And I was just like with a calculator going, wow, the shipping costs really have to understand that. So Holly, talk a little bit about moving production to overseas and what you have to know. And you've learned so much from getting proposals to doing contracts. I mean, we could have a whole show on what you learned about overseas production, but you take it wherever you think best.
Yeah, I get all of the packaging from China, like most companies. I do have my manufacturer. I work with Bentley Labs. They're really prestigious laboratory. I got super lucky working with them. They're one of the largest in the United States. So they do all of the production. They make the powders, they formulate, they've taken my formula, they make it and fill the product. So the packaging I source from China. I tried to do it in the US. It's really expensive. I went to Cosmoprof North America, where I found my packaging manufacturers, and it is more complicated because it's not just one piece of plastic. It's paper jars, it's lined with foil in there to preserve the scent. I'll see if one's open. There's a
little puff too. You got the little, because I remember she writes me an email for the pricing and she's like, puff. And I'm like, puff. Oh yeah, puff. There's an example of the puff. Isn't this cool, guys? By the way, the deodorant, it's not like something you just stick on, you do a little, yeah, there we go. Yeah, thank you, Holly. It's a very unique product. So what Holly's doing is she's having to buy these different pieces, some of them together, but from China, getting them all to come together, getting them all to the manufacturer, and then getting all this timing correct to make sure you have enough to stock Amazon in the different places. So there's also a huge schedule that you have been working on to try to actually make sure you maintain the timing to receive the product in the correct time and quantity you need for your distribution. Let's chat about that for a bit.
It's really important to have a schedule. I'm still getting better at that. The gift set, which has all 4 of the scents in there, it's our #1 seller. And recently we sold out of them. And it's probably going to be about a little over a month that they're not in stock, which is unfortunate because it does so well. And those lessons have helped me, because it's not just the ordering, it's also you have to have the capital. And depending on how many units I'm ordering at a given time, it can be anywhere from 50 to 100,000 plus. So I'm having to come up with this capital each time. So that's also made me think differently of, how do I plan ahead of time? How do I continue to cut my costs to save my own money from my own revenue, so I'm not constantly having to take out loans and pay interest? So there's just a lot you have to think about when you have specifically a product-based business, because it is capital intensive. And so having a very thorough plan, which I'm still getting better at, of the inventory planning. And then what was the second part of your question of?
Well, and one of the things I wanted to point out that you just said, which is so true. So when we talk about the profit margin, a lot of people don't realize, especially if you got a product company, that you have to have the capital, because you could be ordering from China and it could take 30 days or more. Then you've got the manufacturing, and it takes a bit when you have to pay out the money for that till you actually get it paid back to you in a sale. And all of that time period is a cost of capital that profit margins have to also fund. So it ends up being much more than just, okay, I got to pay for rent and wages. You have to think about those as well. So with that, when you talk about scheduling, I know that you're in the process of working and improving upon an Excel document. So I guess another place to go with this, Holly, as much as it has to be data driven, you don't have to have some elaborate software program. It's just a matter of putting the data and managing it. So let's take it from a little bit of how it is very important and can be confusing, but the management of it is, can I just say, common sense a bit, and let you elaborate on that?
It's common sense, and it's really common. It's if you write it down, because I have a habit of keeping things in my head, especially with the inventory, and then it's, oh, everything ran out. But now what I've been getting in a better habit of doing is following the analytics. So I'll go on my Shopify and my Amazon, and I'll see how many units have sold per month in the past 3 months, in the past year. And then I calculate how much time I need in order to order the packaging and order to schedule out everything, so I'm not running out of packaging. And again, I don't have a logistics person. It's just me. My husband has experience in doing some of that, so he'll help me. And it's really just using an Excel document and setting date reminders of myself of when I need to order packaging, and calculating the cost that it will take. And I will say that the longer you're in business and when you're working with manufacturers, you can get terms. So with my manufacturer, I've been with them long enough where I said, this is just really challenging for me to pay this upfront. And so they've given me 30-day terms. So now once it ships from their warehouse to my shipping centers, I then have 30 days to pay the invoice, which these small things, 30 days, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it really helps. And working out different percentages of deposits for my manufacturers in China. And like you were saying, there are a lot of steps. So it's having it produced and then having a freight forwarder pick it up and then working with the right freight forwarder, because there are a lot of different ways to ship. If you don't do it right, you might end up paying more when it arrives there. Because of the packaging I have, there's a 25% tariff, so I have to work that into the cost. There are all of these things that just add up, and not only for the money, but the scheduling and the timing of having things flow.
Yeah, and to one of the people in the audience asked about sharing the document, which no, and that's never the benefit, because what I want to say on that, and I'm going to go back and emphasize, because I've seen this document, I've worked with it to help Holly put together financial numbers. The documents are never about getting a template or taking someone else template. What it's about, and I've created such documents with clients for decades, and it's about what we call, remember when we were talking about process mapping, Holly, it's taking a piece of paper, of whiteboard, and drawing and saying it goes from here to here, and look at the vulnerabilities in each of that. So when we process map anything, and this is what you can have, whether you're a service-based company just selling your own consulting, I really emphasize, and I'm just using this as a second, Holly, to share something with the audience, that everybody process maps their business. I process map my business, which is just myself, saying, okay, even with my ebook gets sold here, and then this happens and this happens. So you draw these lines and you connect the dots. And then at each of the connections, you look at what I call the vulnerabilities. What must be managed? What is a trigger to say an action has to take? And what is the financial cost at that elbow, so to speak? And when you do, that is going to create an Excel document to manage it financially, an Excel document to manage it logistically. So a lot of times, and too often, Holly, I see where entrepreneurs want to download some template and make it work in their company, because too many have been exposed to this false belief that templates exist. You don't have to recreate anything. And they don't realize that true process-oriented companies that succeed, which Amazon's our perfect example of a process-oriented company that succeed, they do it by creating it inside out, so to speak. They look at the processes internally and then create tools to help manage their internal processes. You've got through a lot of that, Holly. Would you add anything to what I was just speaking about?
It can just be really simple, whatever works for someone. You can get some Excel documents and some Word documents. I think Excel is the best. And in my document, I think there are some sheets on there that have the costs of good. There's one that has the time of how long it takes to produce a product. So it's almost a map and a schedule of when I need to order. It's super simple. I think that if somebody were to Google different things to include, or what we did was just having like a whiteboard and drawing out the process, that helped me a lot too, because again, I was keeping all of these things in my head, but actually having things on paper of what are the, what is it called? SOPs, systems of processes.
Yep.
I know that term now. That's super helpful having that, because you know what the process is and what it looks like. And it's also helpful as you grow. And though I have very few people that work with me, my goal is not to do this forever. I want to grow it to the point where I can have full-time employees and pay them and give them insurance. I'm not there at the moment, but that's my goal to get there. And as I get there, by doing all of these things myself, when I hire people, I'll know what I'm looking for because I've done all of these things on my own. So I think it's super important not to just hand things over to someone or to ask for, though it's appropriate. But if you get somebody else's document and you're actually not going through the process of what those things mean, you're really just left not knowing how to operate things on your own. So
That is beautifully said, Holly. And to your point about hiring people, what I always say too is if you map out and document your processes, when you hire someone, you have a process manual to hand to that new hiring person, that new person hired. And therefore, you're going to have the consistencies within your company when it's not just you doing it, which all entrepreneurs hope at some point it's not just you doing it. As you were speaking, I had to laugh because remember when we did the mapping out, I was just starting to use my whiteboard on Zoom, and I was afraid because I start with this like one little whiteboard, and Holly's telling me, and I'm drawing away, right? And then I'm like running out of room, and she's only halfway through the process, and that's when I realized there were so many steps. And Holly was taking a picture of the computer so I didn't mess up when I saved it, because I was like, oh my God, if I lose this and I have to go through this again, I'll never be able to recreate that. I was laughing because I was like, oh yeah, I remember us doing the white papers on that. So right before we leave this to go, I just want to tap one last thing, and that is talking about, and this is a key component for so many, Holly, have messed up on this. I want to go back to gross profits for a second and just talk specific to what you learned when you went wholesale versus retail. And not all distributors are good for you for healthy margins. And so, let's just talk a little bit about that, because so many people don't set healthy gross profit margins. Then they start selling wholesale and they hurt themselves. And you've got a lot of good advice and information on that experience. So can you speak to that for a second?
yeah, again, you really have to understand what it costs you to make and produce the product, so you know what to price the product at. When I launched the mini size that we have, I think I originally put this at $14, and at the time I was selling with Anthropologie and Urban Outfitters, and I didn't know this because I didn't know how to look at any of the numbers or the papers. I was just excited that I was selling with retailers like that. I was actually losing money because of the margin for the wholesale and the cost of good. And I've since raised it now that I know how to calculate all of that. Now they're $22. And I think we talked about this last time. Don't be afraid to raise the price because of what people will think. If you're selling it at a certain price just to get more sales, that's not sustainable. I also talked to a company recently that they had just launched, and their product was, I think, like $25, and they were offering free shipping, and then their cost of good was higher. And I said, that's ridiculous. You need to add shipping to your website. And their thought was, well, Amazon, all of these companies have free shipping. They expect that. Customers might expect that, but unless you're an Amazon or a Macy's or a Nordstrom of the world, you just can't afford to put free shipping. So there are a lot of things that I've learned with that. I used to have really cheap, really low shipping that wasn't covering what the cost of it was. And then I think it was at $50, I put free shipping. And even with that, it just wasn't calculating. I was losing money by doing that. And so I raised it to free shipping for $75. And then I raised the cost of shipping to cover that. And not everyone's going to purchase maybe because of your shipping or the price, but you will find more people who are actually using your product and willing to pay for that. And don't ever be afraid to raise the prices that's going to help sustain your company. Because if you keep cutting costs just to maintain sales, you'll get the sales, which I did that, a lot of that. Even when I launched, I think we had 20% off your first order. And then I was looking at other companies and they had it lower. So then I lowered it to 15%, and now it's 10%. And I thought I needed to offer 20% off to get people to purchase, and it's not the case. I sell a lot of units, and I don't say this to boast, I say it to inspire other people to sell products that you believe in, but I'm making money when I sleep now because I have a product-based business that a lot of our revenue comes from Shopify and Amazon. And though I sell with Macy's and some other retailers, I really put a focus on, for the time being, my e-commerce site and Amazon, because that is where you're going to see the most profit. When you start selling with retailers, and having an omni-channel is my overall goal, but for the time being of growing a sustainable company, and building wealth for myself and my company. It's just for what's right for me is doing that, selling on e-commerce.
And I'm so glad we're talking about the profit margin as much as we are, because really, and you said it from the beginning, you spent a lot of your time not being profitable when you could have if you had known the numbers. And when you were speaking of Urban Outfitters, I remember whether it was that or Anthropology, I don't remember which one, but I was working with you right then, and we were talking about the need to get capital. And I remember just one cost that you don't think about, and there was, and you'll correct me because it's been a while, Holly, but there was like an extra cost because they had to have their own special sticker or SKU. And so here you suddenly get this opportunity to sell in these stores, but you've got a cost you would have never fathomed, which is a cost for their special SKU that has to be placed on your product. So you really have to start looking at, you see many people go, oh, I got a distributor, where do I sign? And they don't realize how these profit margins keep getting eaten up by these additional costs, and you have to adjust the price accordingly.
Yeah, and another thing, you had to put it in a poly bag and then another bag, and then you had to cover the shipping. And my product is plastic free, and so it's just a lot of plastic that I was adding to. And I love those companies. I would sell with them again when I was selling online with them. They're just, of course, you have to do things to protect the product, but those things do add up, and so you have to work that into the cost. And another thing I'll say, that if you do have a product-based business and you want to sell with stores, I've also hired reps. I've gone through so many reps where I paid retainers and nothing really came from it. I've also learned that I'm the best salesperson for my company. Everyone's going to be the best salesperson for their own company. And so I do that on my own now. So all of these positions that I've had before, I just have every day. Monday, I do more of the paperwork type things for my company. Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I focus on the sales. Thursdays, I do social media. Friday, I do anything that's like production related. And I've just scheduled out different days for different departments that I do. And I've made a whole company with mainly just myself. So I am every department pretty much.
I love that. I could just see every day you come to work and you have a different hat. But what you just said is so true. I always say that when you're the company owner, you have to wear all the hats. Just because you're a small company don't mean these departments go away. They still exist. Somebody has to do them. And I think another great point that you make, and I say this all the time, the owner is the best salesperson. Even if the owner doesn't have a background in sales, they still are the best salesperson. So often that is a good place for them to at least focus a portion of their time, because nobody will sell it like they will. It's not till you get to a point and you have your branding and you can define it that maybe somebody takes it over and handles it to the degree that you do. Couple more things, Holly, that because I know you and been around you so long, that I'm adding that I normally won't add, but I just think that you've excelled at this. And I'm going to just call it networking and finding the right-minded people to be around. You've always said to me in different ways about how you met this person and how it's really important in the people you know and get to know. And you've just made different comments that I'm not reproducing in the way that you've said it. So I'm just going to hand it over to you, because I know you understand what I'm speaking about.
Yeah, I didn't make this up. A lot of people say this, but your network is your net worth. Even from having the idea and knocking on my neighbor's door, who's an Oxford trained chemist, and asking for his help, and he helped create all the scents. He's still my friend. We talk all the time whenever I have ideas. We just bounce ideas. He'll send me product ideas. When I had the idea, I also reached out to an acquaintance of our family who's the former VP of Elizabeth Arden R&D. He created the ceramide capsules, those serum capsules, the Provage line, like really revolutionary skincare products. And it was a week into my idea, and called him. He took my call. He walked me through the process of starting and launching a beauty care product and all of the steps that large companies do, which I learned a lot in that process. Unfortunately, there are really no laws to regulate cosmetics and skincare in the United States. That was a learning curve, but I did things by the book of how a large company would do it. I had testing done that was a cost of the products. I also not just the network of people that you know, but I think the resources that are available. I was really confused about the word natural. It's not regulated by the FDA, unfortunately, but I called the FDA. You can call these entities, and I talked to people like on these like government phone numbers and ask questions. So I think being scrappy and resourceful, Googling, and for myself, it was when I had this idea, it was what do I know? What do I don't know? And who do I know who knows what I don't know? And then
Yeah.
calling those people and asking them. And early on, I took a business class because I didn't have, like I said, a business background or chemistry background, but I found at PCC, the Pasadena City College, they had a business program and class, and I was the oldest person in there. And the teacher kept talking about SBDC, and I thought, well, what is this? And it was down the street, and it was Small Business Development Center where I met you and Elber, and I got really connected to USC and that network because of that. And I actually think that office got audited because I was going so much. I didn't know you were supposed to like limit how many times, but I was making like 3 appointments a week. So it wasn't just my network of people that I knew, but outreaching to other people who knew more than I did, who could walk me through the process. So I think when you have an idea, it's okay to ask for help. It's actually essential. And I see a lot of times people have ideas and they just think they have to do everything themselves and they can't ask questions. And though I do a lot of things now with my company myself, I asked a lot of questions of how to do those things from the people that knew how to do them. I started with my company Women Wednesday. So I feature different clean beauty brands every Wednesday. And I was just thinking the other day, I want to start, because now we've been doing it over a year and there are probably 50 different women. I want to start like a Zoom meeting every month with different topics of like, let's share buyer contacts, let's share editors, just different resources. So I think it's about reaching out and asking for help. And then also when you do get far enough to put together some type of community where you can help encourage and help give resources to other people. And speaking of that, someone asked what my lab was. It's called Bentley Laboratories.
Yep, I was just about to hit that right now. I was going to confirm that with you. Thank you for catching on that. You know, Holly, this is from an outside looking in perspective. And, you know, the first thing I always have to say to you, Holly, is I'm just so proud for you. I knew you when, right? So many years ago. And I don't even think at this point, Holly, you are fully aware within yourself how much you have grown in confidence. I can remember, and it's like a different Holly, when you were nervous to call people, you were nervous that you didn't have the business background, you felt as though you couldn't communicate, and you have come so far. I mean, what you've done with the business is amazing, and that's great. But I think who you've become as a person and what you now have within yourself as your self-confidence and the way you're radiating and helping others is truly remarkable. I think that is the biggest venture. And they say sometimes, Holly, that we're put on this world to experience something and we all go do different pathways to do it. I almost think that creating your company has been your pathway to really growing and shining as a person. Because even though I know it's been rough, it has done you well. Do you feel like you've been through a lot?
Oh, yeah, I've been through the ringer. If the last episode is linked, I talk more about this. I'll sum it up very quickly. In starting my business, I think part of that too, I was in not a good marriage. In the time of starting my company, I went through a divorce I didn't see coming. I was literally hit by a delivery van and had to learn how to walk again. I continued to run my business from the hospital bed. I see a lot of companies that started 5 years ago that I see like are much further along, but then I look really in the first like couple of years of my business that I wasn't looking at these profit margins or things because I really was in a survival mode. And I think that my business in many ways saved me, my dog and my business. And I'm happily remarried now. And it's been a weird journey that this company that I have, because I was going through so many mental health issues when that was going on, and checked myself into a psych ward after launching my company. And I'm open about that because I was going through so much and I just didn't want to be here. And I got the help that I needed. And this company has been this really weird platform of using a deodorant body care brand to talk about mental health. So I speak at USC all the time. It's how I got the Forbes job. I wrote about my story and ended up getting a job writing for them. I had never written for a publication before. And yeah, I think that this business, it's helped grow my confidence a lot, but also I do think in our life, we have to be really intentional. I wasn't intentional about that marriage that I chose. And when you're with the wrong person and with someone who belittles you often, or just friends or family or whoever it is, when you're in those circumstances and people are putting you down, it's really hard to shine. And so since that experience and since going through those other things, I'm just super intentional with who I'm around, what I listen to, and it has helped my confidence. So I think it's been my business, but also my personal journey of healing things and choosing who I want to be around and what I want to do.
With that, and you are so inspirational. And Holly, you're going to remember this and I won't remember, but I think you will. And it reminded me of something. So guys, I was having a meeting with Holly right before she got hit with the van. And I don't remember the exact words, so I'm not going to say it wrong, but I know you know. So guys, she's going to tell you, I said something to Holly because we were having a very intense conversation. She was very worried about her company, very down, worried about a lot of things. And I said some words to her right before we hung up the phone, and then she got hit with the van. And you take the story from there, Holly.
It was 2 weeks before that, I got a call from Urban Outfitters, which is not common. Usually you call buyers and they tell you no, and they reached out to me. And I was excited about that, but also really stressed. And so it was April 26, 2019, and we had a call that morning. And I was super stressed about what it would look like, what it would cost. And you said to me, you know, Holly, 99% of the things you worry about never happen. And we got off the phone and I went about my day, and I was just so stressed out. And where I had moved in, it was this parking structure across from where I was living, and I forgot something in my apartment. Went back to get it, and that's when a distracted delivery driver sped up and drove through my body, hit me. I woke up on the ground thinking I was paralyzed and rushed to the trauma ER in Pasadena, and understandably screaming and really upset and thankful that I wasn't paralyzed. I wiggled my toes, and it's the first thing you think to do when something like that happens. And there was a male nurse who was assigned to me because there's a lot when you're in that kind of trauma setting. And I was just screaming about my life and for me and all of these things. And he said, there's a quote I want to tell you. And he was trying to remember it. He said, I'll be right back. And I think because of this like male energy, it was like tough love. It was comforting, but also just like, gotta pick yourself up, woman. And so he came back in the room and he said, 99% of the things you worry about will never happen. And it was just so, is it odd or God, if you believe in that? It was just like, what are the chances? And that whole experience and being in the hospital for almost a month and literally running my company from a hospital bed with a catheter, not being able to walk with a brain injury. I say that because I want people to know that life can be fucking hard, and it can literally, emotionally, physically, mentally knock you down in every way you could and couldn't imagine. And you just have to keep going. I never stopped. I didn't say, oh, poor me. It just gave me more strength. And I've really grown my business now to a profitable company, and hope to continue creating more products and brands and helping other people. And I think that the lesson from that is just take the bad things that happen to you in life and use that as fuel to just keep going.
I think it's so true. And I remember when you called me back from your hospital bed, I'm all concerned and want to know. And what Holly wants me to know is the man said the same quote. I'm like, but Holly, wait a minute. But what, and I'll never forget that. Holly, thank you so much for being on the show again. To those of you who want to see Holly's first interview, which I really suggest that you do, we put the past YouTubes in. We put information on how to get in touch with Holly. Check out her products. They're great. Check out her articles in Forbes. Holly, we're going to have you back on. You know, you mean the world to me, and it's always good to see you. Sadie, I'm going to bring you back on and say, hey, thank you so much for being here with us today in place of Lauren today, Sadie.
Well, thank you. I mean, I personally, oh my gosh, Holly, like all I can say is, wow, I'm so glad I was here to listen to your story, and I checked out your website, and I appreciate all the detail in that packaging design. Gorgeous.
It is
Thank you.
beautiful, isn't it? Well, to everybody, thank you again, Holly. Thank you, Sadie.
Thank you.
Lauren will be back with us next week. Tune in. We're going to talk about social media and marketing and all those wonderful things. And thank you so much for tuning in to Small Biz Talk with your host, Lori Williams. See everybody next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.